Thank you all for being here. I cannot think of a better way to spend a March Saturday morning. I'm from Indiana, and if it comes to plants, I've done it or am doing it still. I am very fortunate to have somebody recognize that I had an extreme passion for plants at an early age. And that was my aunt. I feel like she is still with me today, guiding me through my career and helping me along, giving me the courage. She pointed out at a young age that, you're really interested in plants, I've noticed. And she started giving me books. Remember books? Raise your hand if you remember books. That's how I learned. People are always like, did you go to Purdue? I read every book I could get my hand on. I joined every club, every association. Do you guys have an active Master Gardener Association here? I did that in Hamilton County until I was absolutely burnt out, and then raised a child. So she's all an adult and everything, so I'm done with that. But while I was raising her, I always worked on the side, either teaching classes or I wrote a newspaper column for over 10 years, weekly. And so I was always doing something. And then once I was free to work full time, I got into retail garden center. And before I knew it, I was running the garden center, doing all the purchasing. From that, I went to a wholesale nursery, almost 100 acres. And I was selling and managing that site. And I'm a certified arborist as well. Just anything else throw at me plant-wise, I got it. Trees are a true passion of mine. So I worked with tree service for a while. I still work independently with tree service. So if you have tree questions, I got you. And about a year ago, I was designated the only Indiana Proven Winners Certified Landscape Professional. And what that means is I didn't even have to pay anything for it, but I did have to apply, and you have to prove that you are using Proven Winners in your landscape plans and that you have been, and that you have, time in the industry and all of that. And so I was fortunate enough to be designated that. And so that's how I ended up here, because Trevor found me on that page, that website, which is full of a lot of great information. And I will refer to the Proven Winners websites as we talk because of how informative it is, and just how useful it can be. I think I covered everything about myself. I have animals and chickens and stuff, and I live on a farm. You'll hear all that later. But today we're going to talk about landscaping. Is anybody refreshing their landscape this year? Curb appeal, something that you can see from the road? Good. Who thinks there's a difference between your landscaping and your garden and gardening? Yes. So we're going to talk about landscaping, which is very different to me than gardening. But any plant questions that you come across throughout this, just shout them at me. But we're going to talk about the steps that I use when I'm consulting on site for picking plants and determining what's going to have the survivability and all of those things, determining landscape lines and all that fun stuff. We have to sit down and think about it. Usually this happens in like February or March, and everybody starts to get the itch. And you think, I'm going to put a new bed in the front, or you just moved into your house and you want to put landscaping in the front of the house. First things first, what's it going to live in? So soil conditions vary so much, even in a very localized area. So this property probably has amazing soil. I'm sure it's been farmland and this building has been here forever. However, if you go down the street or 20 minutes outside of town and you come across a huge subdivision where they plowed off all of the topsoil, sold it for a dime, by the way, and you're dealing with subsoil basically to plant in, which is not very hospitable to most of our plants that we want to grow. So we'll talk about those kind of challenges too. Is anybody living in a new build or a new construction? It's very difficult. I did that the very first time I bought a house. We built it, and I learned a lot from planting in that subsoil. So that's first. What is your yard like, your soil conditions? Up here, I would guess that some places maybe are a little sandy, silty, not some clay, but not terrible. Am I right? Clay, alkaline. So think about your soil conditions. Do you have nice, healthy, old soil, or do we need to build up? And so that's, if you're dealing with a subsoil situation or hard clay, that's the easiest and best way to do everything, is to just build up. Newspapers, water, soil, and mulch are your best friend, and it's probably the cheapest route that you could go, and the least frustrating. Then you need to know what your sun exposure is for the spot that you're going to be working in. I had tried to find this picture that I had. It's everything in my yard is melted away, but there's snow in this one landscape bed in the front of my house, and that's where I put all my shade stuff. And I said, hey, if your snow is still, wherever your snow still is, that's your shade garden. So think about where your shade is throughout the day. You don't want to stick a sun plant in the shade or a shade plant in the sun. Even though that is not the end of the world, you can move it. Some things adapt. But just kind of starting off on the right foot and knowing your property is really step 2. Now you need to talk about what you want and what you need. I'm going to put my house on the market in fall, so I'm going to need to put in a fundamental landscape bed. But what I really want, because I just bought this house and I want to be here forever, is I want to incorporate a deck, a pool, a patio, something like that, a water feature. So knowing what you need and what you want, before you go to the garden center or before you meet with your landscaper, really good to make sure that you know all of that stuff before you go ham-haul into your landscaper, because they will talk you into the more expensive stuff. Some of them will. And we talked about the difference between landscaping and gardening. Just, you can garden in your landscape, but it's just a different thing than, for curb appeal and for presentation upon the entrance of somebody walking up to your home, making the entry inviting. To me, the curb appeal is what we're talking about with landscaping and what we'll talk about today. Then how much time do you have for maintenance? Because it isn't just thinking about it and then putting it in, and I'm gonna take these off because I'm sweating. It isn't just getting things picked out and putting them in the ground. It's not a set it and forget it. You have to make sure that you know how much time you have to water on a regular basis, or at least to start with the first year. And if you don't have time to water, you are gone half of the year, that's fine. We can find other things. We'll put a boulder in and some sedum and you'll be good to go. But don't expect, hydrangeas, big, beautiful blue hydrangeas if you go to Arizona half of the year. That's what my friend's mom does, so that's what I said. So how much time do you have for maintenance? How much maintenance do you even want to do? Because, it's like a lot of bending over and pulling things and spreading stuff and looking at leaves right underneath and on top for bugs and diseases and all of that fun stuff. So it's a commitment. It's not like adopting a puppy, but it's more than a gerbil. Also, what are your preferences in color schemes? Something I always ask. Okay, are you a red-orange person or are you a pink-purple person? And I can look out here and determine pretty much where you guys sit. It works. I notice it in grocery stores too. If you go upon someone's grocery cart, they'll be wearing a color and all the products in their cart will be the same color. And then if you go to look for a product, you'll notice that they make a product with a label with just about any color that there can be. That way you'll pick it up and take it with you. Anyways, that's the sneaky marketing that I don't approve of. But you don't want to, it's okay to mix all your colors and have it be riotous and you love it, right? But maybe on the side of the house. In the front of the house, we want to stick to, I'm a pink person, so maybe I'll have pink and white. Or I'm a red person, so maybe I'll have red and yellow, red and orange, whatever. Red and purple is really fun. But it's it's more basic in the front. And then not only are you looking at, I saw lots of like pamphlets and flyers out this morning, people getting jazzed about what they want to select to put in their yard, and that is great. My house, I'm sure, is a fire hazard from all of the information that I have on paper. And like I told you, I've read through all of them. Proven Winners puts out like a lookbook every year, a gardener's guide, and that is so much fun to get ideas. But not only that, look around at everybody on your drive. Look at all their landscapes and notice things that aren't doing well. You might think you want a Christmas tree in the front yard, but as you drive around, you see the Christmas trees that are big are dying out at the bottom, or they got really scrawny and they don't look great. It's not thriving. So you don't want to spend $350 on a tree on the low end installed, and then just have problems with it the whole time, or be spending your life treating it for a fungal disease or spider mites. Nobody has time for that. So look and see what's thriving around you. That helped me a lot early on. And if you notice something in somebody's yard and you really love it, I'm not going to say the Plant Snap and all of those apps aren't great. I mean, they're convenient. They aren't great. They're convenient. But oftentimes, I can't believe the suggestions that it comes back with for some of these plants. So, call the local extension. Your county extension will help you. Contact the Master Gardener Association. They will help you. Go old school sometimes when it comes to getting a correct idea on something, because Pinterest and Google Lens, and they don't care if it's going to invade your yard or poison your puppy, but the county extension and the master gardeners will help you. So those are just some suggestions that I have in thinking about do we really want to get into this? And of course you do, because it's so much fun. So when I'm looking at a landscape, I'm thinking first, what are the anchors? And the anchors to me go off the corner of the house, flank maybe your front doorway, off the corner of the garage, but something with some height that makes a statement that goes in an area of focal attention. So this is just a landscape that I helped with a couple years ago. It was already perfectly, this Japanese maple was in a good anchor spot. They have a weeping Norway in an anchor spot. Those two are going to be too big before long, but that's the idea, is having a nice focal point on these certain areas of the house where you can start to build the rest of your landscape around. Oh, here's some fun ones. Okay, so in the furthest to the right or left is a coral burst crabapple that was at a house that I lived at 7 or 8 years ago. And honestly, when it was blooming, I would sit outside and just watch it until it was done. And if a storm came, I would be like, no! And I would just look out the window at all the leaves and the blooms flying in the breeze. But that was an awesome anchor right in the front of the house. It just set a nice little anchor right there. We had some shrubs going around it. I ended up putting some ferns and some hostas in along the walk, and it was really nice. The next one, a little landscape enhancement that I worked on with a lady. She didn't have hardly any room, but she wanted a focal point. We needed an anchor, some height. Imagine if you didn't have this here. It's just you look at that one spot and that's all there is. And you want to be able to, your eye to naturally go from one beautiful thing down to the next, over and beyond. So we put a tree-form hydrangea in there. And then working around these anchors that were already in. So a crabapple anchored off of the corner of the house actually was working and doing all right. And they had flanked the front window with dwarf Alberta spruce. It's not my favorite, to be honest, but it's what they wanted. And sometimes you just have to go with what they want. And they have a lot of mite issues. So as long as you know that and you go into it with that in mind, dwarf Alberta spruce is just great. And then an old house of mine, I had a huge, it doesn't have to be a tree. I had this full-size oak leaf hydrangea off the corner of the house. It was appropriate because it was a 1-story house. Now, if I just had a big old 2-story house and just had that, the balance wouldn't be there. But because I had a 1-story like bungalow, that huge hydrangea off the corner of the house worked really, really well. So everything from that anchor is layering. You want a good foundation shrub, which is typically something evergreen. Usually everybody wants something evergreen in their landscape, but boxwoods, green velvet boxwood is a wonderful one. Green gem, the Hetz midget arborvitae does great. Mr. Bowling Ball. Proven Winners has a lot of newer compact evergreen shrubs like tater tot. I mean, come on. Just the name alone, you want to go get it. Fluffy is another introduction that they had several years ago, and I think that is a beautiful specimen or anchor plant. It's more pyramidal. So your foundation shrubs should be there. It's kind of like your basic layer, your black t-shirt, your collared with this tie, whatever, for the guys. And then from that, it is now more about your personal preference and what, you want to see when you pull up to your house. Do you want to be happy and smile? Or when you pull up to your house, you want to be like, oh, I really need to do this, and this weekend, or the like. You know how that is. Also, it pops off of that green, so that's why it's good to have that good green foundation background to really show off your color that you're going to put in front of that. And we'll go over some options for the shrubs of color. And then lastly, like earrings and shoes, the accessories come in, and that's your flowering perennials, your annuals that you're going to commit to for probably most of the season. When you pull up, you're going to see those same ones blooming all season. So we want to carefully plan that to make sure it's not going to be in stark contrast to what you have, your bones that are there every day. Okay, let's talk about some shrubs. I have some favorite shrubs for sun, and this is not like scour the earth, look for this very special shrub. This is, you're going to find these at reputable garden centers, and they're going to work for you. They're not going to be iffy, or if they do have if they have a little bit of persnicketyness to them, I'll show you how to work through that. But Weigela has come a long way in the last, I would say, like 10 years. It went from having like powdery mildew and just blooming like twice a year to blooming nonstop, all season, clean foliage, different colors of foliage, different flower color. Used to be you just saw a huge red Weigela, and it was, 10 feet tall and 10 feet wide if you were lucky, and it bloomed once a year. They've come a long way with that now, and it can be a very appropriate landscape shrub. Question? Yeah. So the question basically was, how many hours is it that's full sun? So if these are my favorite sun shrubs, how many hours of sun do they need? That morning sun is fleeting, it's perfect, it's fine. It gets that hard end of the day sun. Weigela can stand it. Some things won't want that, and if I come across one of those in the presentation, I'll let you know. But Weigela, full sun, easy peasy, you'll love it. And then it's going to be bright until 10 o'clock at night even. But and even if you could put a Weigela in the shade, it will do just fine. It might stretch a little, so be a little leggy, or not have the vibrance to the leaf, and maybe not flower as much. It's not going to die. But that's if you put it in full shade. She asked if any of these were affected by the soil. Of course, everything prefers a more neutral pH, like around a 6 or 7, 6.5, 7. Where I live, it tends to be more like 7.5, even 8, which is great. But we have a lot of pink hydrangeas where I live, and I've decided I'm okay with it, that I like it better. So the Snippet series, Sonic Bloom, Spilled Wine is awesome for the front landscape because it grows like 2 foot wide, a foot tall maybe, and just looks like this beautiful little melted mound of burgundy. And then the flowers are real vibrant pink, like almost like your pants, pink purple. Really shows off well against that dark burgundy. Viburnums, they're doing a lot with viburnums with proven winners because they're deer resistant. If anybody's got deer that they're dealing with. Oh dear. And also because they can be quite large. Well, proven winners has selected and selected and selected until they've gotten some dwarf varieties. I don't know if you guys are familiar about the genetics and the trialing that Proven Winners does, but I really believe in it 100%. I've been to their trial gardens, and I've dealt with their Gold Key growers, which are growers like this that grow over 10,000 plants per year. And they are really narrowing it down to be the best plant. Now, it's like a couple years ago, Limelight Hydrangea was the best plant, right? But now there's Limelight Prime. And it's just like when, the cereal box says improved taste or whatever. It's a little bit better, so you can expect it to either be smaller, flower more, or be more disease resistant as these newer varieties come out. It's not simply just repackaging and rebranding. It really is genetics. On the viburnum brandywine, I should have put a picture, but if you do some research, brandywine viburnum is amazing. It has longer leaves than most viburnum, and then it has like a pink berry on it, clusters of pink berries that turn like a dark purple, and in the fall, the foliage is a bright red. Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous brandywine viburnum. Baby spice, which is that Korean spice, but it's much smaller, much more compact. And the Korean spice viburnum, of course, it's a staple, right, of a garden, but it gets huge. And then people don't know how to trim it, and then it never flowers, and it loses all of its wonder. An Allegheny or leatherleaf viburnum sometimes gets walked past because it doesn't catch your eye when you're walking down the shrub aisle, but it's mostly evergreen. It's easy as heck to grow. It's usually not expensive, and it grows quickly, so it makes a really good hedge if you're looking for privacy between you and your neighbors. Anybody grow 9-bark over the last 15 years? That was one that was riddled with powdery mildew, and they have bred that and pulled genetics until now. All clean foliage, darker foliage on the summer wine 9-bark, and then just a little bit of tweaking, and we have ginger wine 9-bark, which is beautiful. It almost looks like the color of that jacket that you have on, ma'am, and stays that way all season. Doesn't bleach out in the sun or the heat of the summer. And tiny wine, which everybody's lots are getting smaller, or people don't want to do as much trimming, and this is a truly dwarf physocarpus or 9-bark that you can grow in the landscape that won't get carried away on you. Where I live, we can't sell barberry anymore. So this was a good substitute for me for barberry, and it doesn't hurt as much at all, actually. No thorns. And then the thing you see everywhere now, it's like the new Stella d'Oro of hydrangeas is the paniculata hydrangea. So we're going to go into some detail because I believe that it is such a great, useful plant. I am a little afraid that it's getting overplanted, but with so many varieties and so many options and how well they do, you can't blame them. I still love them. I still put them in landscape designs. I still plant them myself. So it's the most bang for your buck because that bloom truly lasts from, depending on the variety that you have, June through October versus some of the other shrubs that you might pick up. Burning bush does nothing for me but collect mites and scale. And there's a hydrangea, rest assured, for any size that you have or sun exposure. The paniculata hydrangeas love full sun and will bake in the full sun, but if you put them in a little bit of shade, they're still happy. They're still happy. So on the northwest corner of the house, or even the northeast corner, they'll still be happy. They're good workers. So this comes from the Proven Winners website, or all of their marketing materials. If you go to their website, they have a whole page that's just dedicated to the hydrangeas. And they've really bred these to be, I mean, this limelight hydrangea, I've seen them 8 foot tall and 8 foot wide. You can reduce them by half and they will still grow just about as tall in one season. All the way down to Bobo hydrangea, which is one of their more dwarf varieties. Now there's pufferfish, and I'm sure there's something I'm missing. Just every year there's a new variety, but these all will start out white or cream or even like a chartreuse color, open up, and then the flowers actually age to a pink. So you have this white profusion of bloom, and then everything sort of gets, turns a little bit pink, and then some of them are really showing off by the end of the season, like Firelight, Little Quickfire, which is a dwarf that has more open flowers. It's not that closed mop head. And because I was talking about the hydrangeas period, I thought this, the reblooming hydrangea that they are calling the macrophyllus, those are the ones that like the shade. They'll grow in any soil pH, and they'll tell you if they're not happy. It used to be, you bought a hydrangea shrub, and it might have been blooming in the beginning, and then you never saw it bloom again. Like, you can still buy those and still put those in the ground, and it is heartbreaking. And you think it's you, and it's not you. It's the plant and your environment that you live in and all of that. So they make great foliage plants. You won't miss it. It's beautiful and clean. But these reblooming hydrangeas, they have gotten the genetics to where they truly do bloom all summer long, and they hold their blooms. So, you can cut them and bring them in. My mother used to be like, oh, I can't believe you bring flowers in the house. It's like, I can't believe you don't bring flowers in the house. That way I have my garden in with me while I'm in the house and while I'm out of the house. So if you cut those, it's gonna take them, they say it's gonna bloom on new wood, but honestly, it does so much better on older wood. So that would be the wood that had grown the previous year. So these do prefer some protection from the winter. Winter winds, just brutal winter, because those buds will just desiccate on the stems and you'll have an unproductive shrub, but very pretty foliage, which is not what everybody wants necessarily when they've spent the money on a blooming hydrangea. Yes?
How do you protect the buds?
So if you do have an area where you need to protect the buds, some people will say straw or leaves. I hesitate on that just because there could be a fungal issue there, or even cocoon, bug masses, whatever that stuff. So I think burlap, just wrap it with burlap, good to go. It breathes, it protects. There's also frost cloth that you can buy. The only thing you don't want to do, and this is even in protecting your plants going into a sudden frost, is use plastic, because plastic conducts the cold and it will be more detrimental to those poor little buds. So burlap, I think, works great, or a purchased frost cloth. Proven winners with their Let's Dance series. Every year there's another one that it's either shorter or it blooms more or it has, different color foliage, but you can't go wrong with any of the Let's Dance series of hydrangeas. If you have a protected area, if you're lucky enough to have shade in your front and you can put that in the front, that's pretty great. And you can basically know that it's going to live. The survivability on the Let's Dance is very good. And the color split on these guys is just showing you representation of growing in a soil with high pH like mine, and I get the pink flowers, or where I fell in love with hydrangeas in Massachusetts, which sounds silly because in Massachusetts they're 4 foot tall and abundant, and they're all huge blue blooms on top. It's like something out of the Wizard of Oz. You just don't even think it's a real thing. And here it really isn't a real thing, but we can kind of get that look if we're using the right varieties. So high soil pH is going to give you that pink. Lower soil pH is going to give you, where I live, purple, not really blue, which I like the purple. And then if you really work on it, and you can get that down enough to where you have blue blooms. Just keep in mind that when the blue blooms age, they turn like this kind of like gray green. And I just decided I didn't like that. And so I decided I wasn't going to put aluminum sulfate on my plants anymore. Honestly, for bang for your buck, if you have $40 and you're going to go to the store and you're going to buy one shrub, I am buying a hydrangea because it's the showiest and easiest thing that you can grow. And that's why they're everywhere. Shrubs in the shade, as long as I've been selling plants, are just so challenging, sort of uninteresting. It's just not everybody's jam. Nobody really likes to, unless you really love shade gardening, and then you're putting in perennials. That's why there was a whole talk. Did you guys attend the talk on shade perennials? So there was a whole talk on shade perennials because it's like, that's what you fill shade with, is perennials. An interesting, and one of my favorite shrubs, because if you have certain amount of money to spend on a shrub, you want more bang for your buck, right? So the Fothergilla is something that is easy to grow in the shade. Now, it's slow as molasses, but it's worth it. It has very fragrant early spring blooms that are like cream colored, and then the fall foliage is orange and red and purple and yellow, and it's native. So if you're into the native thing, I am, but I'm also a horticulturist, so I am into all the things. So I like native stuff, but I like other stuff too. But so that's native. Also, the sweet spire itea, that is native. So if it's native, it's gonna grow a little bit easier for you because it's already meant for this environment. That doesn't mean that, a rabbit isn't gonna come through and eat the whole thing down to the ground, but at least you're getting a jump start. Boxwood can go easily in the shade. It's one of the few, bless you, evergreens that will actually kind of deal with the shade. The only problem with that is, especially if you have any sort of like automatic irrigation or you really love watering, they could easily be overwatered, and that does lend to these blight diseases that we're seeing in boxwoods. Everybody was really upset about boxwood blight, and we were really panicking. As a wholesale grower of boxwoods, we had acres of them when boxwood blight became something that we heard of, and we never dealt with it ever. Now, I've dealt with Volutella blight, which is a different strain of blight, all over the place. So you can be focused on one thing and really worried about one thing, and all the while something else is happening under your nose. So that's why people like me exist, so I can help you through those things. And also for shrub, we talked about the macrophylla hydrangeas, or even they're not proven winners, but endless summer. They're modifying their plants to bloom more reliably. Endless summer, here's my take on endless summer. Endless summer, the longer you have it, I've noticed that about year 8 or 9, the plant just doesn't produce the flowers anymore. And I think that it's a reverting back to the parent plant. That's what I think. Bailey's will probably say, no, it's not. You need to buy new ones or replant the old ones or whatever. But it's all breeding. It's all breeding. Oh, and then lastly, the fun stuff. After you get all that not as fun stuff in, we accessorize. We put our earrings on, our necklace, our glasses, our shoes, and we present ourselves to our guests colorfully and happily. Whether that's perennials or annuals, I feel like a mix of both of those components is good. I tend to, I pick stuff up out of people's yards that I work in, or I have a lot of odds and ends, but I tend to do a lot of annuals in the front of my house. And even if that's seeds, I've done nasturtiums from seeds cost me $2, and I had flowers all season long, and they were beautiful. Or definitely shopping here for all of your annual needs. As you can see, I'm kind of a purple pink person, purple, pink, blue, white person. So I tend to use a lot of purples. Here I dropped in some perennials for a customer who couldn't get anything to grow in the shade, and you would think that was the culprit. And she said, just keep fighting this shade, fighting this shade. While a lot of times it's not the shade, it can be roots of a tree, which are going to be dominant for moisture and nutrients. And not only that, it was a walnut tree. Anybody have any experience with walnuts and hickories in their landscape plants? So walnuts and hickories exude toxicity from all parts of their plant. Leaves, petioles, nuts, bark sloughing, everything. And it can go as far as 50 feet out from the drip line. So if you get a mature walnut tree, which they get big quick, the drip line on that and the feeder roots go forever. Not only that, squirrels love, this is what they do, they bury them everywhere. And so when they're burying the walnuts everywhere, you're getting that toxicity there as well. So if there's even one in the neighbor's yard, sometimes that's a challenge for you. Now, not every plant has an adverse reaction to the juglans, the toxicity. Some things grow quite well with it, and there's a lot of research online. Walnut toxicity resistant plants. Just, Google's wonderful anymore. But make sure that when you are going on a Google journey, look at your EDUs, your college websites, your county extensions. Proven Winners is a reputable site. A lot of the growers are reputable, but Pinterest. When I worked retail, people would come in and they would be like, I want this plant. I saw this plant and I really want it. And it's like a purple-leaved hosta with pink astilbe blooms. And I'm like, that's unfortunately not a real thing. And she was like, but it's right here. It really isn't right there. Let me show you something similar. So I tend to stay away from Pinterest and those kinds of things when I'm doing my research or I need to look up something. I go with the extension sites, Purdue website, Michigan State, Ohio, has really good information on their website. They're a good horticulture school. So we were able to find plants that she liked that were resistant to the juglans, and she's happy now. But had she not called out an arborist to consult her yard, nobody might have picked that up. And then she's plants and plants and plants. Nothing grows, nothing grows, nothing grows. You get discouraged, and then the next thing you know, you think you have black thumbs, and you don't. It's a black walnut. So alliums or something, and also that will be rabbit resistant. It's basically a flowering onion or ornamental onion. Dianthus is one of my favorites because it smells good and it's colorful. And I don't have to, when I go in and do a landscape design, if I subcontract out planting, or even if I just deliver them a plant package, I don't have to guarantee any of it. So my customer doesn't have to pay a higher price for a guarantee, because I know that what's going to go in there is going to work well, and it's basically like picking it up in a garden center. Does anybody not plant annuals every year? Hopefully not in this crowd. That's my favorite thing about gardening is every year the annuals are different, and Proven Winners is very good about that. And it truly is that if you see that pot and you're wondering if you should get it, just get it. It's gonna grow, it's gonna be beautiful. If you don't know how to take care of it, just go to their website. It truly is a proven winner. And then the finishing touches. We like to make a whole lot of work for ourselves in almost everything that we do. And it's just not that hard. We don't have to work that hard. And I'm mostly German, so I need to find efficiencies everywhere I am. And so I have not used one stitch of landscape fabric ever in my life. And being in wholesale and landscaping, I sell it to landscapers all day long. It's expensive and, it works. Most of your weeds are gonna sprout. They're gonna fly in. The weed seeds are gonna fly in and they're gonna sprout in your mulch. That's where most of these things happen. And if you think it can't root down into your landscape fabric, it will. I've seen it. It'll root through your landscape fabric. And also, you've seen dandelions grow right here. They don't let anything stop them. And so I like to not recommend the landscape fabric because it is pricey and there is a lot to it. And it can hold too much moisture and cause fungal issues or root rots, and you just don't want that. So I use newspaper. It used to be in Indianapolis, the newspaper had a soy ink. I think it still does. And so it's not toxic for the soil or anything like that. I just layer newspaper. Do you guys remember newspapers? Do you realize how hard it was for me to find a stack of newspapers? And finally, a local church, she's collecting them for some reason, and she let me ransack her newspapers. But I just put newspaper down everywhere. If I'm building a bed, I use a mixture of topsoil, composted cow manure, and mushroom soil. Equal parts. It doesn't have to be like, it doesn't have to be so complicated. Nothing is earth-shattering when it comes to gardening. Because at the end of the day, if so-and-so isn't doing well over here, well, then we just might pick him up and move him over here and see how he does over here. Or, watch that one and see if it dies, maybe we replace it with something that's different. But layered newspaper, spray it down because the wind will pick it up and take it away. I use cardboard, and I've been saving some of my Amazon cardboard.
Yeah, Amazon's really good.
It's really good, especially like if you're building raised beds with the corrugated metal. That's a good barrier. I don't like it as much if I'm just doing mulch for like my front landscape bed because it's just so stiff and, hard to cover up, and nobody will ever know that you just have a whole bunch of newspapers lying up under your soil and your mulch with this. And it keeps the weed seeds that you churned up in the soil, it keeps those at a minimum because they're not going to get light. And it's also going to break down over time so you can actually dig in it in a couple of years. At that point, all you're doing is spot treating for weeds. And that's we could have a whole class on weeds. Maybe we'll do that next year. And that's a whole battle in and of itself, and will turn people away from gardening altogether. So a bag of mulch and some newspaper, and then this is my favorite, my best friend in the whole world. I have 3 now, but the very first one I ever got in 2001, same brand, looks exactly the same. It's just a little bit worn. It's nice because I can see this when I inevitably leave it in the yard. Don't mow over it. It's sharp if I want to divide perennials. I use it to plant my annuals. I use it to weed. I use it to, those weeds that kind of carpet in a mat? I'll shave them suckers right off, throw them away. So I haven't owned a trowel since 2001. If I go to someone's house and they're like, hey, can you do something? Because this always happens to me while you're here. And I'm like, yeah, sure, do you have a trowel? And they always do. They have a little trowel. I bring it out, and it's cute. And this is so much more effective, and you could sharpen it. You could just be like, stab, stab, stab. Or like when the Japanese beetles come out. Stab, stab, stab. Not murderously or anything, but this is, and I believe in this product exclusively, A.M. Leonard, not a sponsor, and they have a website, amleo.com. So 2001 to 2025, that's over 20 years. I've never had the handle, no problems with it or anything. This one's actually my mom's. I lost her a couple years ago, so this one is very special to me. And also, I just keep it in my car because I travel a lot, and like, let somebody try to take my Kia. So watering is really key when you install your new landscape. It can be overwhelming. Go buy a soaker hose. I'm sure they have them here. Weave it through your plants. Buy the timer that comes with it. And on Amazon, I can't believe the irrigation setups they have these days. And so it's easy to water anymore. Most of the time, if you're standing out there with your hose watering, you're really not watering like you think you are. You could stick your finger down in there and it's dry half an inch below where you were just watering for 10 minutes. It's because it waters the soil and not the leaves. So he asked if the soaker hose was better than having like an aerial sprinkler, and the reason is because it waters the roots and not the leaves. You want to keep the foliage off the leaves for disease issues. You really only want to have about 2 inches covering any sort of tree roots. She asked how much she can cover existing tree roots. Because they're acclimated to that level of sun that it gets and the moisture it's able to readily receive, and you don't want to stir it up too much. And as an arborist over time, if like, oh, I feel so bad when I see people put like a raised bed around their tree and they add 4 or 5 inches of soil and the tree just declines from there. And it's just because it doesn't know what to do with that. This is Boober. He is my chief support officer. It doesn't show up, but it shows that he is actually a mix of poodle and Fraggle. And he is just the love of my life. But I also have 3 cats and a bunch of chickens. And can you guys all see my email address here? It's just thetreelady@waytogrowindiana.com. Thank you. Thank you.